Welcome back, everyone, to this, the 12th episode of Blue Collar, White Collar, with me, your host, Kieran, and my co-host, the ever-so-wonderful Nicholas Wheeler-Hughes. Say hi, Nick.
Wow, the ever-so-wonderful. That's very flattering. Hi, everybody. How are you, Kieran?
I am spectacular, but you guys aren't going to find out why.
Yeah, well, this is our 12th episode. We've been doing one episode a month, which means we are coming up to our one-year anniversary of Blue Collar, White Collar. Very exciting. And what we decided to do for this 12th episode, as we kind of wrap up this year, kind of like a school year, and get ready for season 2, which will begin next episode for our kind of August season 2 start. And so what we decided to do is talk to each other really about our the kind of fundamentals of where our political views come from, because we've had a lot of differences, and the whole point of this podcast is that we look at the world very differently. And I think the idea of this episode is to understand why we see things so differently.
Yeah, I agree. We both
anything to add?
We both seem to agree that we have fairly strong moral compasses, and yet we come at the world from very different end perspectives. So I think it's interesting to see how we can both start out from a place that we both agree that we're fairly good, honest people, and yet, we have such different worldviews that it's an interesting deep dive. So that's what we're going to do today. Do you want to get us started?
And I'm going to kick us off by asking you, Kieran, to describe in 3 sentences your political ideology.
3 sentences. So to me, I describe myself as a populist libertarian. Those things kind of contradict each other in certain ways, but to me, I believe that government should be as small as possible, infringing on people's rights and liberties as little as possible, while at the same time doing the most that it can to benefit the everyday person. So I think that certain policies that, when it comes to something like welfare, I think that the universal basic income system is much better because it doesn't trap people into a welfare block. People who get trapped there and they're stuck. So UBI is a better system to me, even though it's still technically a welfare.
And yet so many people who are libertarian, one of their kind of most core fundamental beliefs is extremely low taxes. Mm-hmm. And yet a program like UBI would cost a lot of, we'd have to increase taxes in order to pay for UBI. So how do you reconcile those two things?
So to me, the way that we do it is with the advancements in AI and also the social medias, they make massive amounts of profit off of people without really providing very much for, with social media, they don't really provide much for us, and yet they make so much money off of us. And AI, it's going to scoop up so many jobs that I think taxing those types of industries at a much higher rate, I don't know what that rate would be how I would try and fund such a service.
A very leftist perspective, right? Tax the rich is generally thought of as a pretty leftist perspective. Would you agree with that?
Oh, definitely. But the whole point of capitalism, every person works and earns their own wage, and they have the right to the money that they earn. When you've put so many people out of a job, like with artificial intelligence, that you have to start accounting for that, and someone's got to step in. That's what I think, at least. Step in, take some of the profit that they're making, and put it towards the good of the people. Because if, hundreds of thousands of people start losing their jobs because of automation, something has to be done.
Right, and your solution is something that looks more like a welfare state, where the government plays a bigger role in taking the profits of big corporations that are profiting so much off of AI and redistributing it down to the kind of working class, lower class.
Well, I don't like the term welfare state, but I understand that that's how it looks. And to me, it's not so much. I don't like the idea of redistributing it. It shouldn't, in my mind, there should be no government intermediary. The tax money should flow in, and then a certain amount of it should automatically get redistributed without greedy little bureaucrats with their hands in the honeypot.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because I feel like when you have companies that are so powerful and profiting so much, the ability of government to regulate them, to tax them at high rates, becomes diminished. I think one of my most core beliefs is that corporations themselves have become too powerful, right? We have these mega corporations, the trillion-dollar companies. I heard NVIDIA, the AI chip company, now the number one biggest company in the world, and it's like only in a few years that's just skyrocketed past Google, Meta, Apple, all the kind of big ones. They're now like a $4 trillion company, right? Yeah. Which is bigger than many, possibly most
countries in
the world.
Definitely.
So the fact that we have that is such a fundamental problem to me. And without talking about the risks of AI, and I think this kind of new space race in AI is very scary because it's moving so quickly, and I feel like we don't have the power to regulate it. It's just going, at a speed to compete with China. That there is no time for regulation, and frankly, lawmakers don't understand AI. Nobody does, let alone old, kind of more traditional, white dudes in America, for example, in the Senate. Sorry, but it's true. And yeah, AI.
You think Nancy Pelosi understands AI? That's a woman.
Of course not. Of course not. Classic hating on Nancy Pelosi, but it's okay. I'm not the biggest fan of Nancy at the moment.
No one should be.
That's not what we're talking about.
Okay, let me interject though.
The bigger point. Let me just finish my point. The bigger point that I'm trying to make is that something that informs my political ideology is the fact that capitalism has gotten so out of control because we have allowed corporations to profit so much off of the backs of working people. They have become so powerful. There are so few mechanisms through which we can regulate them, and it's reached a point where there is no government in the world that can regulate these companies. You look at China, who is, they are communist by name, but what they really are is a super capitalist country with an incredibly powerful government, right? They are more able to regulate their companies than the Americans are, and yet it is almost oligarchical in the sense that the government and the corporate class are intertwined in ways you see, for example, in Russia.
It's actually
not to go down that. Not to go down that rabbit hole. I want to keep us focused. Okay, I want to keep us focused. So feel free to respond, but then I'm going to ask you a little bit about where your beliefs come from.
Okay. Yeah. So when you said that corporations have gotten so large that countries are not able to rein them in, essentially, that's really not a new thing, though. You look at something like the East India Trading Company, where they had so much power and they did so many things. They were massive companies, and you look at people like the Rockefellers. Like, it's not a new thing that we have corporations so powerful that they are more powerful than countries, but the difference is when they work with a government to manipulate the system for their benefit, or if they work in a legitimate free market system. You end up with, right now, corporations lobby the government, and so that's how you have a much more corrupted system where they're able to take more control. They really wouldn't have an influence on things if they didn't have lobbyists, if they were just regular companies. And that's another way that they become so large, is because they work with the governments, make regulations that make it more difficult for competitors, and then they end up rising the ranks because they're the only ones who are able to work in these systems, and they end up being multi-trillion-dollar companies, when if a real fair market system existed, other companies would rise up and that would be legitimate competitors. That's what I think.
Okay, so I'm gonna pivot a little bit here. Kieran, tell me a bit about how politics was talked about in your house growing up. You grew up in Fredericton, New Brunswick.
Mm-hmm.
You had, I think your parents had some different political views, but I just kind of wonder how politics was talked about from, when you were growing up.
So, my parents did have slightly different political views. My dad, I believe, sometimes voted more conservative. I remember that when we were very, very young, he was much less pro-union than he now is, being part of a university. And my mother's always a die-hard lefty. She's NDP through and through, except she voted for Justin Trudeau. I forgive her for that.
So many did.
In my house, my dad really didn't talk about politics that much. We talked about a little bit about values and stuff, but most of my education that came from my mother, because my dad worked so much. So to me, politics was talked about. There was a lot of trash talking of people like Stephen Harper, for one thing, and also just the instilling of I don't want to say socialist, but semi-socialist values, which is why deep down in my soul I still see myself as a lefty, because that's where I got the idea that the government should be there to help the people who need the help, is through my mother. My mother is the one who instilled that in me.
And yet you would not describe yourself as a lefty. Now, you voted for different parties in different elections. You're certainly not a partisan in the sense that you have loyalty to one party. I would say that's pretty true for me as well. Maybe a little bit less because my ties to the NDP.
You've worked for them.
I've worked for them. My dad ran for them. So I do certainly have an affinity to the NDP. But do I? Yeah, my father's book.
I got a signed copy.
Signed
copy, bitches.
Do I love where the NDP are right now? No. Should I say what I voted for?
Go right ahead. I did.
I thought about voting Liberal this year. I live in Montreal, and my riding is super Liberal. My vote wouldn't have mattered one way or another. The outcome was determined. I think if I was in a place where it was a conservative versus Liberal race, where the seat could have gone one way or another, I would have definitely voted Liberal. But I voted NDP just because I think, for one thing, at the local level, I was a big fan of my NDP candidate, who was actually an old friend of mine from school, and I thought that he was very present. I thought he ran a good campaign, and yeah, I like the guy, so I voted for him. But I was not a big fan of Jagmeet, and I thought Carney was the man for the moment, and I still think that right now. So yeah, all to say that neither of us are super partisan, or at least that we always vote for the same party in the way that you see a lot in the States. And I think that's one of the great things about a multi-party system, is that you see people who are less tribal in Canada than in the States.
We have like a a two-party system with an asterisk, basically, because it just goes back and forth, but we have a little bit of fringes on the side, a little bit of frill.
But not actually. Like when you look at popular vote, when you look at like sheer number of votes, it's not actually this like huge gap. This election it was, but there are often elections where the NDP or the Bloc, like they actually get a significant amount of votes that are not incomparable to the other parties. It's just that they've never formed government, these other parties.
Yeah.
How, Kieran, did your political ideology evolve as you started working? And then again, how did your political ideology evolve when you became a father?
So on the timeline, in 2015, I voted for the NDP, Thomas Mulcair. I don't remember who my riding person was. They ended up losing. So clearly at that point, I'm going to try to be a bit quieter. My son might be waking up. 2015, I voted for the NDP.
And what were you doing in 2015? Give us some context as to where you were in your life.
At that election, specifically at that time, I had just gotten out of school, and I started working at Best Buy. So I'd just gotten into the job market, but I hadn't really gotten my toes. I hadn't really sunk my feet into it yet. So that really didn't impact me at that point. Really, the next election, 2019, I ended up voting for the PPC at the time. What changed in between those years, part of it was that I started working a more blue-collar lifestyle, but actually it was through listening to people like Jordan Peterson, amongst other figures, that really sort of shaped me to realize the sort of negative aspects of the left-wing movement that were putting me off. I also saw some other things that were bubbling up that I didn't like.
Can you give a couple of examples of what you didn't like?
Just like a toxicity, people being cast out of the party, of the group, just for minor differences.
Cancel culture?
Yeah, I really didn't like that. And so that made me, pushed me towards the center. I'm gonna go get him. He's waking up, so I'll be right back.
Oh, you're a good dad.
Thank you. So get back where I was. It was some of the toxic aspects of the left-wing side. There were some certain things around gender norms and trans ideology and stuff that it started to question some of that. And when that opened the door to some more right-wing ideas, and that's when I discovered libertarianism, and that really fit for me because that was a perfect mixture of the live and let live ideology that I think that of liberty and also a little bit of economic conservatism. That's how I got into that. And then in the next election, 2021, was it? Yes. Yeah, I voted for PPC again. What really made me more solidified at that moment was all the COVID shenanigans and what was going on. I still think what happened was a major crime against humanity, and people need to pay for what happened so that it will never happen again.
Can you be more specific?
A lot of the lockdown policies. Essentially, every Western nation became an authoritarian state in just a matter of weeks, and people were essentially living by decree of what the federal government at that time decided, and they did certain things like lockdowns, banning you weren't allowed to go to a different province in Canada. That's a violation of our fundamental right of freedom of travel.
I couldn't go to your wedding.
Yeah, you couldn't come to my wedding because of it. I think that's a fundamental violation of some of our rights. During the trucker protest, they froze some people's bank accounts who donated to it. I think all of that is a travesty. Our government needs to apologize for it, for everything that they did, and some people should even be legally liable for some of the things. Someone like Anthony Fauci, who lied to the government, lied to the people, knew what was going on all along, and still chose to deceive the populace. Someone like him, I think, he's in his 80s, so whatever, but if he was a younger man, I think he should serve prison time. Some countries were worse than others, of course, but that's one of the things that really solidified me in my libertarianism, because I saw some of the awful authoritarian policies, and it's just, that's not for me, which is why in 2025, again, I voted for the Libertarian Party, because that's who I am now. But a slight change was being a union worker now, because back in 2021, I only started being a union worker. I'd only been there for less than a year, or about a year. Whereas now it's a much more integral part of who I am, and so I've stepped back the other way in terms of, that's kind of where I added the populist aspect to the populist libertarian that I identify as. Sorry for the rambling.
It's super interesting, and your path is one that so many young men have followed. This is true not just in Canada, but in the States. You look at what's happening in Europe. All of these, these things that have happened with, as you say, like the left becoming obsessed with identity politics, right? And this culture of canceling and shaming
victimhood
people, right? I think has pushed a lot of people away. I also do think, you're talking about COVID. I think a lot of people were turned off by the way, a lot of men especially were turned off by the way they couldn't necessarily work, and their freedoms were inhibited, for sure. And I think what we are seeing now is that young men are, there is a swell of support for kind of more right-wing parties, specifically from young men, right?
Yeah,
Look at what
definitely.
happened in the States. Trump won off the backs of men in this election.
And then slapped them in the face.
That's right. But 2016, he won off of white voters, men and women. And this election, Trump won off of male voters of all races. And so I think that we, and I say we as in progressives, need to reckon with that and understand that this hyper fixation on identity politics and kind of wokeism is losing, like pushing a lot of people away, especially men, right? Who feel muzzled, who feel victimized simply for being a guy. And that pushes people into this alternate sphere. And you see there's kind of this extremist, I think we've talked about the manosphere on this podcast before, where you have this kind of hyper masculine bubble of men who, many of whom are, incredibly misogynistic and who have just come to hate others. And that's a serious problem that we need to reckon with, right? And
yeah,
so,
those are the people that I see took the same journey as me, but went too far. That's how I see it. Is they got on the same train, but they didn't get off at the stops that I seemed appropriate.
And look, I'm also a young man, and I feel the pull of that. And in many ways, I feel frustrated, extremely frustrated by the left, and have myself felt villainized on many occasions for being a white guy. Now, is white privilege a thing? Yes. You don't agree. I absolutely do think that's true. And I also think that there is still a huge power disparity between men and women. So am I incredibly fortunate? And do I have opportunities that people of color don't have, that women don't have? Yes, I believe that very sincerely. And we need to work towards a place where we can have equal opportunity for all. However, I also believe that there is very often this assumption on the left that if you are a white guy, you are therefore a villain of some kind, and I've felt that before. So what I think the left needs to do is get away from this this politics of a hyper fixation on social and identity issues, and start talking much more about economics and how our formulas for the economy are better than those of the right. right? And the right, and I'm talking about Trump, is tax cuts for billionaires, right? That is what many of them argue will somehow, stimulate the economy, and that's just not true. Am I getting a phone call? Nope. I'm podcasting.
Yeah, so I agree with a lot of what you said there. One of the things I wanted to pick up on is, your commentary about the disparities that are still in existence between races, creeds, sexes, all that. And I was wondering, do you believe in a quota system for people based off of immutable characteristics?
No.
So how would you do a quota system to benefit? So like right now down in many places, you get preferential treatment for simply being of a certain race. I think that's a violation of people's rights, personally, but that's a thing that currently is in existence.
Yeah, I agree, and it's what is it? Well, there's DEI. There is AA, right? Affirmative action. I'm not going to make a blanket statement one way or another. I think I don't think that there is a one-size-fits-all solution. I was and remain a big fan of things like gender equal cabinets, right? Where I think that Justin Trudeau was right in 2015 to appoint Canada's first ever gender equal cabinet, right? Where there were an equal amount of men and women in these positions of power, these ministries. That was not necessarily something that he was forced to do. That was a choice, right? It's not as though there was a policy that requires prime ministers to do that. Mm-hmm. However, I think Justin Trudeau very rightly understood that the best way to uplift women is not to necessarily create policies that force women into, that create these quotas. I think what he understood was, let's put women in positions of power, and that will have this trickle-down effect of shifting things around. And I could talk about a few different examples of what we saw coming out of that. But that is kind of the first step, right? So we need to have, and this is by, again, it's much more about opportunity. Like, we need to have more opportunities for women to participate in, high levels of business, right? Like, how many CEOs can you point to and say they're, and identify them as women, right? Very few. Should we force these companies to have, a woman CEO every other CEO? No, of course not. That wouldn't work. How can we make it so that 50% of the time, when looking at the candidates to become the next CEO of a big company, women are just as qualified and just as capable as men, right? So I think it's trickier, but I agree that, and I saw how many people felt that DEI policies, they felt like so I don't know, targeted or discriminated against themselves. So I think there are better ways to do it, but again, it's a case-by-case basis. I do, however, believe that we should be striving towards gender equality in the workplace, racial equality. Like, these are still things that are incredibly important. And when you look at statistics like people living in poverty, like, surprise, they're overwhelmingly people of color, right?
Also overwhelmingly men, but people don't usually talk about that.
I don't know if that's true.
Look at the numbers for the vast majority of the hyper poor across the world. It's men. Men are the highest of the highs, but we're also the lowest of the lows. one of the things, I understand why someone from your perspective would think that a gender-neutral cabinet is a important thing, and I understand the importance of having women in positions of influence, but some interesting studies have been done that what ends up happening is if you have one woman on a board, she keeps her mouth shut, doesn't say anything. You have two women on the board, they start talking. By the third woman or individual of a certain group gets added to, say, like the board of a company, that now becomes a voting block. They now have influence. And so you really only need a small amount, but you do need a block of them before they have real influence inside of whatever organization. So while I don't think that a gender neutral across the board cabinet is, I mean, it's not a bad thing if it ends up that way, I do think that having a certain amount of these people in these positions is actually a very good thing for people as a whole. So while I wouldn't mandate a 50-50, I would like there to be a minimum number allowed. So like, I don't know how many people are in a cabinet, but like if you had 100% of one group, whether that be men or women, I don't think that's good. So I would try and make it so that at least a certain amount of them, a voting block of them, are on said group.
White men have been in power, have been the dominant group in Western society for centuries, right?
That's how long Western society. Anyway.
It keeps reproducing itself, right? So there is a cycle here where white men set up other white men for success.
Nick, do you know who the CEO of Google is? One of the most powerful companies in the world?
Yeah, it's the Indian guy.
So is it all white men, or are you just seeing the ones that you want to see?
Oh, you got me. There's one Indian guy.
The one yes, because it's one.
Proven.
It's one. There's many of them. Indians and Asians are statistically overrepresented in these types of.
Let me say what I'm going to say without throwing individual examples that do not at all contradict the fundamental point that I'm making here. The point that I'm making is that for centuries, white men have set up other white men for success. I don't think you could disagree with that.
I don't completely disagree. I disagree that they set up all white men for success, because the average person who is in this country and the West white is also has the boot of the government and corporations on our necks. So they benefit people in their in-group. It's not benefits white men, because there are white men like me who work day in and day out in the sweltering heat and earn virtually nothing compared to these people. So it's not.
I understand that, and
it's in-group out-group preference.
Is very valid. That feeling is very valid, and I don't want to take anything away from the fact that there are many white men who struggle day after day, and who feel that there are all these policies that are directed towards women, towards people of color, to try to help them, and they say, "What about me?" Right? That's very real, and I acknowledge it. I'm not trying to say that that's not true. Okay. The point that I'm trying to make is that if we want to reach a point where all people have equal opportunity, does that mean that we're not going to have people who are living in poverty from all backgrounds, people who are living, working blue-collar jobs? Like, I'm not suggesting that we could get to a place where that wasn't true. All I'm saying is that we should strive towards equal opportunity, right?
I agree with you on that.
That is something that I think a lot of people disagree with, and that is something that that disagreement is something that I take issue with. I wanna refocus.
Well, I want to address it. I want to address this because this is important. So
we've talked about this a lot, though, Kieran. We've talked about this on the podcast a lot. Fine, go.
Okay.
3 sentences.
It's going to be more than that. So the way that you see it is you see a program like affirmative action is there to help raise up someone, say black people, to a point where they can then be on an equal playing field like everyone else, correct?
That is the idea of affirmative action. Yes.
Okay, yes. So the way that I see it, if you think of a pendulum and you say the rules are over here benefiting one group, and then what you do is you say, oh no, the outcomes are in a way that is unjust, and what you're doing, or what the West has done with things like affirmative action, has said, we're going to actually take these rules and bring them over here and make it so that it benefits these people, whereas if you were to let the pendulum go at either of those states, it's going to swing back and forth. To me, what should happen is there should be equal rules and regulations for everyone, and what happens if you were to pull a pendulum straight down? It stays straight down at the equilibrium. So that's the way that I see the world.
Okay, the last thing I'm going to say, because I can't just let that go, is that you need to appreciate the difference between equality and equity, right?
Yeah, and equity is garbage.
If we were all starting from the same point, I would agree with you. But we are not all starting from the same point, right? If one person is starting here and one person is starting here, to say that all policies are equal, right? It says, okay, well then you guys each are, let's say, applying for the same job. Who's going to get it? This one, right?
Not necessarily.
So it's yes, necessarily.
No, I completely disagree.
So the point that I'm making is that you need to appreciate that we are not all starting from the same place. Certain groups need more help to get to that kind of high, that success, right?
No, see,
success is not achievable for everyone right now.
No, see, I believe in these groups, and while over time it might take these groups longer to achieve equilibrium, if you have a system that treats everyone fairly, over time, what should happen, it's called regression to the mean. Everyone slowly shifts back to center. But if you have policies that benefit certain people and not others, that doesn't happen. True equality will happen when true equality under the law exists. Yes, it might take time. It might take generations before certain groups reach levels equal to other groups. But it's better to have an equal playing field for everyone than a system that benefits certain people, which then creates resentment, which then creates animosity. And we know what happens when people...
Give me one example, if we're following your pendulum example. Sorry, we shouldn't be getting into this.
But it's fun.
Give me one example in your pendulum where there is a country or a community where the average income of a white person is higher than the average income of black people in that community, in that country. Can you give me one example?
Well, I don't have statistics.
You're talking about.
Well, first of all, no country has implemented such kind of regulations. But when you have families who come over from Vietnam and who have literally nothing and start out poor as can be, but actually work their asses off so that their children can go to Harvard, and then their children get into Harvard, and their children start companies, and the next thing you know, they're millionaires. Or they come from Taiwan, or if they come from India. This happens every day. You have people coming over and
pay to get into Harvard. They can't afford to go to Harvard.
Student loans, taking out loans. There's many ways.
They live under crushing debt their entire life.
It happens. Yeah. It happens every day. People who.
But it's much harder. It's
much harder. But they don't need the help. They can do it on their own. These aren't weak-willed individuals. These are people like everyone else who, if you let them, they will do their best and achieve what they can for their children, and their children will then go on to be likely even better. If you look at right now the average salaries and average wages of Indians and Asians, they're higher on average than white people. And what happened not 100 years ago in the United States? Oh yeah, they locked up all the Japanese people because what happened at Pearl Harbor. And yet the Japanese are hyper earners in the United States. So you can't say that if a group is oppressed and they're down here, they're going to stay down here. When you have fair rules, people on average, it works its way back to the mean.
All right. One of us is going to have to bite the bullet and not respond.
And it's going to be you.
I'm going to bite the bullet, even though you're fucking wrong.
Nope.
How has fatherhood changed your opinion or informed your politics?
So weirdly enough, it hasn't really that much. Like, I think in some ways it's made me want to be harsher on especially people who hurt kids. So I don't believe in the death penalty. I think the death penalty is wrong unless you're hurting children. If you've molested children, if you've murdered children, if you've harmed children, I am okay with you being killed. I know it's wrong because there's, people get fingered for the wrong thing all the time. People end up being executed who are innocent. It happens. But if you can be proven to have done something like that, fuck you. I don't care. So that's probably like the one thing that I've changed on. Is before I would have said no death penalty. It's too risky. You're taking people's life, which is one of your fundamental rights, is the right to liberty, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness and property. You're taking their rights away by taking their life. Fuck you. You took the rights away from a child when you did that to them. That's the way I see it now.
Have your opinions on things like maternity leave, paternity leave, daycare costs, early education, healthcare, have any of those things changed?
No, because for the most part, my worldview really incorporated a lot of those things already. Like, I'm already an advocate for paternal leave. Maternity and paternity leave, I think, is important. I got 5 weeks off I had up to 5 weeks off when we had my son. Is that too little? Yeah, maybe. She got a full year, so at least she got that time when she could stay at home with the baby. So maybe we could use some more of that. I know a lot of European countries get more maternity and paternity leave than we do. I do think it impacts the economy when people stay out of it for too long, so maybe there's certain places that overdo it. Climate change, no. I still think that climate is going to be not dealt with through regulations, but by technological advancement, so I don't think that's changed at all. No, really not that much. It has, weirdly enough, it has made me more of a believer. And not that I believe in God, but the day that my son was born was the most religious experience that I've ever had. Seeing the creation of life, it will change you in a way that you're going to understand someday, I hope, Nicholas.
Interesting. Would you be willing to say a little bit more about that?
I think I don't know if I've told this story, but the day that my son was born, they were both sleeping. All I had was this little chair that like leaned back into, like, it was actually fairly comfy for it being a chair. And so I didn't sleep very well. So I got up and I went downstairs to see what kind of food they might have available. All they had was vending machines. Anyway, on my way back, I walked past. It was a nondescript religious establishment that they have in churches. So anyone could go use that for any reason. It's unlocked all the time.
Like a prayer room.
Yeah, not exactly that, but yes, essentially. So, if you're Jewish and you want to go in there and do whatever ceremonies that Anyway, I stopped on my way back, and I walked past it, and I stopped, and I thought about going in, and I really wanted to do, but part of me turned away, and I don't know why. I think it's because being an atheist for 20 years plus, when you're a kid, you don't really know any better. So, but yeah, for 20-ish years being an atheist, it felt kind of,
it felt wrong. Your whole life.
Essentially. So, I went to Sunday school when I was a child, but I didn't believe that stuff. Once I became really aware, I always thought that's silly mumbo jumbo, but it's a lot more complicated than that. I believe in good. And I don't think it's a coincidence that in the English language, God and good are one letter away. I don't think. If humans are fallible, and we're not right, and we can't understand everything, and there is an omnipotent force in the universe that bends the world towards good and the just, then I think it is completely logical for us humans to have a incorrect and false understanding of said force, and likely we would anthropomorphize it into a being. Yeah.
That's very interesting. You never told me that story.
No? Okay. I told a couple people.
I think we're getting towards the end here. I'm not totally sure how we're doing on time, but I do want to ask you one.
46 minutes.
Question. Okay.
So I want to do a speed round.
What is your speed round?
Well, we just have quick question answers, very short elaborations, that kind of thing. We'll do it. We can do that after your last question.
Okay. Well, yeah. Okay. Sounds good. My last question is the magic wand question. Always fun. Here's your magic wand. Handing it to you from Montreal. What is one policy that you would enact at the federal level, and one policy you would enact at the provincial level, if you could?
For what ends?
Just like, I kind of want to take all this ideological discussion that we've had and translate it into something extremely tangible, right? What is one thing that you feel Canada and
I have one.
New Brunswick.
Since
What is
education,
one thing that you would change?
since education is ran provincially, for provincial, I think the education system, I guess everywhere, but since I live in New Brunswick, needs a massive overhaul. I think I don't know exactly what it needs to look like, but there's a few things that I know. I think that kids need a lot more interaction with other kids that aren't their age. So I think the structuring of schools where all you interact with is kids your age, I think is a bad thing. Historically, kids interacted with kids older than them and younger than them. And I think there should be almost like a mentorship program where both older and younger kids can help educate older and younger kids in subjects that they might be weaker in. When I was in grade 4, my math was stronger than some kids who were in grade 5 or 6 because they were really bad at math. And I think it would be a good thing if maybe I could have tutored them and in certain subjects that they might have been better in and I was struggling and they could have tutored me as well. I think that would go a long way towards educating kids that need the help. I think it would also help with socialization. I think it would also help with delinquency and people who have authority problems, because a lot of kids have problems with authority, but maybe if there's someone you look up to or maybe someone that you don't feel threatened by helping you learn material, that it would help with that. Federal
Yeah. Can I say my provincial? Or no, you do two, and then I'm going to do my two.
My federal change would be, I think, and I don't know why we have it this way, I think the economy needs to go back to a deflationary money instead of an inflationary money. I think what that does is it ends up benefiting the people who own, not the people who earn. You look at the richest people in the world, it's not because they earn billions of dollars, it's because they own things that are worth billions of dollars. And the people who earn their money, who work hourly wages, they get fucked by inflation. If things cost 9% more, I effectively have that much less money, whereas something that is worth 9% more, that makes them go from, however much to X% more. So if me owning a house, yeah, that's a good thing when inflation makes it worth more. But your average person doesn't own a house, doesn't own, they might own a car, but they don't own a company. So I think a deflationary economic system is actually a better system and more akin to what we used to have with things like gold. And also now a modern version of that would be something like Bitcoin, where Bitcoin are worth more all the time, not worth less like the dollar is.
Interesting.
And okay, I'll say right off the bat, I don't know what the downstream consequences of such a system would be because I haven't seen one in effect in the modern era. There are no economic systems like that currently, so I don't know how that would work. So I don't know what that would entail. Anyway, go ahead.
Fair enough. I would have the federal government spearhead the east-west clean energy grid or electrical grid, which would hyper-incentivize companies to begin producing more electricity. And the best way to produce electricity now is through clean sources. So I would hope that the building of that grid would increase our net production of electricity, thus lowering our dependence on oil, because I would argue that Canada is a petrostate, and I think that there's an opportunity to become a clean energy leader if only we have the political will to invest. The other thing I would do, and this is kind of a provincial and federal thing, is just I would overhaul the way that we do housing. I think housing has just become completely out of control. I think for one thing, the federal government needs to play a bigger role in housing than it has previously, because right now the federal government only funds housing projects that are being led by the provinces, and that they themselves have gotten out of the business of building housing themselves. So I would get federal back into the business of building. I would cut tons of red tape because I work inside the Quebec. I work inside the kind of Quebec housing sphere, and it is so dysfunctional. Like, it's unbelievable how ineffective the province is at building right now. And so I would totally overhaul that. I would cut a bunch of red tape. I would restructure, and I won't get into the details of it, but I would redistribute the balance of power in housing, because right now it is all centralized at the provincial level, and they are, and this is not just the current government, but especially the current government in Quebec right now has no idea what they're doing. So it's incredibly frustrating because you see housing prices skyrocketing and people who are being forced to move way out of the city if they want to buy something, and it's gotten to a point of being absolutely ridiculous.
Cool. Oh, I think we're going to move on to rapid fire round. Okay. Hyper short answers, very little elaboration. I'll start. Nick, who's your hero?
Who's my hero?
Who's your hero?
Oh, that's way too big a question.
Simply, just answer the question.
My father. Who's your hero?
I actually, there's 4 people that I consider my hero, but for the purpose of the fun of this, one of the I'll go with 2 of them, because I know 2 of them personally. One of them is
one of them my father?
One of them is my grandfather. One of my grandfathers. I'm not going to name which one because I have 2 grandfathers who are still alive. I'm sorry, other grandfather, in case you hear this. He probably won't. And number 2 is James Hughes. Yes, your father is one of my heroes. Despite working as much and as hard as your father did, he was a great father to you guys, and I hope to be like that.
Thank you. I know he would appreciate you saying that. Okay. I didn't realize that was the type of question. I prepared more like kind of, should Pierre Poilievre remain the leader of the Conservative Party?
No. No, I don't think so. Why?
Why?
I think he's toxic to a lot of people. He brought a lot of people in, but I think he also pushed a lot of people out. So I'll give him a chance one more election, even though I'm not going to vote for him, but no, I don't think so.
Okay.
What do you think of Zoran Mamdani?
Love. I think he is the answer to the Democratic Party's quandary. I think that and I'm actually glad you asked me this because he.
I knew you would. I knew you'd love this guy.
Earlier. Zoran Mamdani, who should become New York's next mayor.
Likely,
yeah. 33 years old, democratic socialist, hyperfixation on economic issues, talking about free childcare, talking about rent freezes, talking about making public transit free. I think that he has cracked the code, and that a lot of people who voted for Trump because they were frustrated that Democrats were only talking about social issues saw Mamdani. They said that's the type of rhetoric that I'm looking for, economic issues, economic populism. I'm voting for that guy. So I think he is exactly what the Democratic Party needs.
I agree 100% on a local level, at least.
Will Trump run for a third term?
No, but I think he's going to toy with it for a long time. I think it will be just before the deadline that he finally tells people he's not going to. I think he's going to toy with it until the end, just to fuck with people. What would you say is your most right-wing belief?
What is my most right-wing belief? I've got a few, actually.
I did say most.
My most right-wing belief is, like, does anti-woke count?
That's like a centrist thing. No, I want a right-wing belief, like fucking shoot drug addicts or some crazy shit like that. I know that's not what it is. I was being hyperbolic, but
Trump's foreign policy was better than Biden's.
Ooh, fun.
Do I think that? Do I really think that?
The fact that you're considering it is even good enough.
I would need to think about, because it's a rapid fire. The left is like, fuck you.
That's okay. My side is always mad at me. So
I think Biden was fucking weak, and I think that these two wars erupting was not entirely his fault, but I think he certainly didn't do much to prevent those wars from happening.
Yeah, I agree.
So yeah, I think Biden fucked up, and I frankly think that the Democrats have just been too weak on internationally. But at the same time, I have a lot of problems with Trump's receding. He killed that program, like his aid, USAID. Like, yes. I totally disagree with that. I totally disagree with bombing Iran.
Okay, you're elaborating too much. This is the lightning round, Nick. I love you, but this is the lightning round.
Sorry, but strength is important.
I agree.
Sorry, strength is important, and you need to project strength. And I thought Biden was weak.
Well, he was a frail old man.
Fucking Biden, dude. Fucking Biden.
Your go.
Yeah. My go. What does the NDP need to do to rebuild?
Well, I think for one thing, as you already said, I think the left needs to adopt a Zorhan Mamdani strategy. He may be someone who's said some partisan left-wing things in the past, but he left that all behind, said screw the Israel topic as well. I'm gonna work for the people of New York, and I think the NDP needs to do something like that. I could vote for the NDP if they focused on being a union party again instead of a woke party. Nick, do you hope to hold office someday? And can we get a timeline on when you're going to try?
I have certainly thought about it. I don't foresee doing it in the near future, but I think I will run for office one day.
What party?
Kieran, do you have any opinions of Wab Kinew, the Premier of Manitoba, and do you think he could be an interesting leader of the NDP in the future?
I did a little bit of reading about him after you mentioned him a few times, and he seems like a fairly good leader. I could see him taking a lead in the NDP. I don't think that his ethnicity is an issue, but I do think that some of his ideas are going to be off-putting for some people, but not enough that it's. I think he'd be a decent leader of the NDP.
Okay.
How far should drug legalization / decriminalization go?
Pretty far. I think there's a difference between regulating how drugs get into your country, like fentanyl, and regulating gangs and stuff like that. I think that's separate from the legality of things like magic mushrooms, LSD, more recreational drugs.
Should I be able to shoot meth in my own living room if it doesn't hurt anybody? Except myself, obviously, because it's meth.
I don't think legalizing meth would increase the consumption of meth. I think people understand that meth is bad, and you only are doing it when you have kind of gone down this road of addiction that has led you, down to this place. And I don't think that making it that it being illegal is the reason people don't do it. If it's not accessible, people won't do it, and so that's kind of important. But when you look at Amsterdam, who have decriminalized basically all drugs, do they have a big drug problem? No. So I think that you need to tackle problems of addiction are not solved by making addictive things like meth illegal. And you need to better understand how to address that.
I agree.
Will Mark Carney get reelected?
Honestly, really, that's a hard question because it's going to depend on how things go. A lot of things could tank his popularity. I actually think he's been doing a relatively good job. I appreciate some of the things that he's trying to do. So I'd say so far, I would be okay with him being reelected. Yeah, that's the closest to an answer you're going to get from me.
I'm liking how he's doing it. He's tough.
I don't know if he's tough, but he's clearly a hard worker, and I think that goes a long way.
Trust me, people I know people inside the Carney government. He's a tough boss.
Bet she's ripped underneath that suit. No, I'm kidding. He's probably scrawny as hell.
If you're not delivering, that guy doesn't have time to go to the gym. He probably understands the importance of staying healthy. He seems like a healthy guy. I have one, but you go.
Do you agree that the West is in existential danger?
From what?
When I thought of this question, I was more thinking from the inside. Not an outwards force taking us down, but something happening from the inside that takes it down.
So we're not talking nuclear warfare.
No.
We're not talking climate disaster. We're talking is the system so fucked that we are spiraling towards pure chaos?
Yeah. Some people turning towards anarchy, some people turning towards communism, some people turning towards fascism. These crazy ideologies that could destroy the West, because as you say, the system is not working, and I do agree that it's not working.
I think the system. My answer to this is kind of what I said at the beginning, which is that I think if we're talking about internal, and we're not talking about climate, we're not talking about nuclear warfare. I think the ability of government has become so weak that the ability for government to regulate AI is extremely problematic, and I look at AI and the terrible futures that it could usher in, and I find myself more and more worried about it with every passing day. It's still not something that I think about all the time because it's still so early, but it's just like it's completely unregulated, right? These companies are just building AI with no oversight, and there's infinite amounts of money to build computers that can think for themselves. And like, I've seen The Matrix. I know how this story ends. But no, I do think we're barreling towards a future we don't understand, and I worry about that. So that would probably be the biggest thing that concerns me. Who will the Democrats? Who will run for the Democrats for president in 2028?
Who will they nominate or who will they run? Like who's going?
Who will win the nomination? We know some people who are going to run, but who will win the nomination?
I'm definitely afraid. I'm definitely afraid that it's going to be Gavin McInnes. Not Gavin McInnes. What am I saying? Newsom. Sorry, I was thinking too many people with the same name. Yeah, Gavin Newsom. I apologize. No, I don't like Gavin McInnes. Why would I apologize? Yeah, I think that would scare me. I know a lot of the governors are wanting to run as well, and they could easily do something. But I think if they didn't speak out against Joe Biden's senility when it was obvious, I think that they should be tanked. And I think someone who stepped up and was honest should be the one to receive the nomination. Who that is, I don't know. You're probably sad that Zorhan was born outside of the United States, so he can't be president.
I wasn't going to say Zoran.
No, but
that wouldn't be my answer.
You probably would. No, but you probably would like it if he was. No, I seriously don't know. There's so many figures that are going to try, much like 2020, that it's gonna be a wide field that people are just gonna have to figure out what they want.
Yeah, it'll be super interesting.
Who do you think?
Although I also think that we fixate on kind of presidential politics so much.
Too much for sure.
And like American media is so messed up. Who do I think?
Yeah.
Who do I think, or who do I want?
What do you say? Either or both.
Like, yeah, I think.
Who do I want? Andrew Yang.
I don't think Andrew Yang.
No, he's
gonna run again.
He's left the Democratic Party, so.
Although I think Pete Buttigieg has a shot. Although I don't even know what he's doing now. Like, what is he doing?
The Flagrant podcast.
Yeah, podcasting. What everyone's doing. Not us, though.
I meant being a guest.
Yeah, I actually don't totally know. I don't think it's going to be like an AOC. I think it will be someone who is more.
Will she run?
AOC is not going to run. I think AOC might challenge Chuck Schumer for his Senate seat.
Yeah, I see.
In New York. But I don't think she's going to run for president. I don't think anyone else in that movement is necessarily positioned to do well in a Democratic primary. However, I do think that a lot of people are going to look at Mamdani and say that's the type of platform I want to run on.
I agree.
Very economic focused, and I think that there are some governors. Some of their names I had at the tip of my tongue when we were talking about who might replace Joe Biden. But I kind of forget them now. But there are some interesting governors. Gavin Newsom, I don't want to run because I think that there's this fundamental problem with the Democratic Party where you look at them and you go, you can't afford to live in cities or
ran by Democrats.
Where Democrats rule, right? And I think that is the most obvious with California and how incredibly expensive it is to live in California. And so Gavin Newsom might be able to kind of point at all these reasons that he is, that he should be president. But I just think the fact that it's become so absolutely unaffordable to live in California is too easy to attack him. And that he plays the politician, right? He is an actor in many ways. I don't know how sincerely I believe him, and everything he says is so well curated, and I think he understands and is pushing back against the kind of woke wing of the Democratic Party. He's trying to suggest that he's tough on crime, that kind of thing. But I don't know.
That's just because he's gearing up for a 2028 run. What about someone like Andy Bashir? I think that's his name. He's the governor of Kentucky. Right? Yeah, I think so. It's super popular Democratic governor of Kentucky.
And he's kind of down with the Bernie Sanders fight the oligarchy thing.
So I think he's a strong. I think that would be an interesting contender. I don't know about strong, but an interesting contender.
Yeah, that's a good point. I should watch him a little more closely.
Yeah, I don't know a lot about him, but one of my favorite news hosts is a big fan.
Kieran, I always know we've reached the end of the podcast when I need desperately to pee, and that time has come. I And so I want to, first of all, say I think this was a great episode. I'm glad to wrap up our first year with this discussion, and looking forward to season 2.
I have one last question for you, Nicholas. This is one from the heart. What is one of your favorite memories of us together?
That's so cute. And so off topic.
That's why I'm ending on it, because it's about us and the relationship we have together.
Well, my first instinct is obviously to talk about high school, but I'm actually going to answer with a bit of a curveball question. I think one of my most cherished memories is when you introduced me to your son.
Oh, that's very nice.
I remember that very vividly. Pulled in, this is 2022, that I came to visit you in New Brunswick, and Eli was asleep.
No, it would have been 2023.
Eli was. Oh, I think you're right.
Yes, because he was born in 2023.
Yeah, that makes sense. Oh, but we did see each other in 2022.
Yes, you did. You visited Fredericton.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking of. But in 2023, I came to visit you and Sarah in your home. I remember Eli was asleep at the time, and then
your parents left.
Parents left. I fell asleep, woke up. Eli was already awake, and I remember this moment of you holding him, and me kind of walking into the living room, and you said, "This is Eli," and then you looked at Eli and you said, "This is your Uncle Nick," which I thought was very special because obviously we're not blood related, but it felt to me as though our friendship had just transcended generations, and that I had connection with your son, and you called me Uncle Nick, and that was very special for me.
I did the same today, actually. Called you Uncle Nick.
You did, but that was the first time, and that was why
That's
I remember
sweet.
it so vividly.
Mine is the gay cows.
Equally profound. Kieran, what do gay cows eat?
Hey. Oh. You're gonna get canceled for that. Not anymore, this is 2025, bitches.
Let's just go into the manosphere and hate on everyone who isn't a white man. Yeah, fuck it.
Anyway.
JK.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us for this wonderful year together in this podcast, to many, many more. And as always, thanks for stopping by.